For the love of God, man. Just every week. And now you're singing about gonorrhea. No wonder we get a flag.
The views and opinions expressed by the guests of Sasquatch Experience do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the hosts, sponsors, or affiliates of the Sasquatch Experience. As always, listener discretion is advised.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Does a legend walk among us, lurking in the forests of our world?
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my sensor light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man or something. Looks like a man. I don't know what it was.
For over 15 years, we've talked with scientists, researchers, investigators, and witnesses, trying to gain insight and proof around the existence of this mysterious entity.
Jesus Christ, you better... Tia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at
me. Join us as we continue into the investigation of the Sasquatch Experience.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Sasquatch Experience. Sean Forker, James Baker, Henry
Go ahead.
Nesbitt, somewhere along the lines here. Everybody's here tonight as we have a very interesting show for you this evening. Vance actually brought up wanting to do a show on the Kandahar Giant, and that's what tonight's show is. A little bit of a story that, well, maybe it's a little bit more fiction than fact, or is it? I don't know. We'll let you decide as we go talk about it. But happy President's Day to everyone who observes that federal holiday anyhow. Hope those of you that had a day off enjoyed it. And, of course, mail means that one less day without a bill. So everybody else should be a little happy about that. Guys, welcome. Good evening this week. It's nice to see you. How the hell you doing?
Me doing good. Baker, how you doing?
I'm good. I had a really productive day.
Oh, well, with my mom, according to the pre-show. Yeah.
Or mine.
Ow. I can't knock up either one of your moms, thank God.
Oh, thank God, right? I couldn't imagine that.
Hello, James and Brian. Good evening. Sasquatch Seekers here in British Columbia, Canada. Welcome to the show tonight, guys. Henry, buddy, how you doing, my friend? We got you a wide scope there, man.
Yeah, this is the best we've seen you yet, Henry. This is great. And the red straw and the soda cup, and this is amazing. Good for you.
Let's just keep those pants
on. I can't complain. Even if I could, who would I find to complain to?
Not me.
Somebody complain to, or you'll never get that fifth.
There we go. James, always on that. You're like a Yenta, always on that. Get Henry. Maybe Henry's happy in his.
This is true, right? Maybe.
I don't know. Well, guys, last week or 2 weeks ago, our podcast got posted today because somebody forgot to kind of put it up there. I don't know who that was.
Yeah.
So the show is up for folks to listen. Hey, we had a good filler in there. We had a Sasquatch Experience Classic with Bob and Kathy Strain that posted up, which should have kept our listeners' appetites wet for the time being. But again, here we are live tonight. I wish I had some more news to talk about, but it seemed like those last 2 weeks just flew. And there was very little time in between to really get anything. But guys, I'll give you some free time here if you had anything you wanted to talk about before Vance kicks it in fifth gear and takes over.
Yeah, right. Okay, go ahead.
Henry, you want to tell us that story about Theodore Roosevelt?
Well, I guess in honor of President's Day, Henry, Baker's asking you to talk about the wilderness hunter story from Teddy Roosevelt. And,
Oh goodness, I've read the story so many times. I'm very familiar with it.
Well, why don't you
Apparently,
tell
there
it
was
to
a
the
trapper. Yeah, there was a trapper named Bauman who was out with his partner in the mid 1850s in Idaho, and he and his partner had been out trapping. All of a sudden, they come back and their camp is all torn up. They don't know what or who did it.
just messed up.
But they find some footprints, and Bauman's partner, I think it was Bauman's partner or Bauman himself, concluded that thing's been walking on two legs. And the second night, they actually had something show up at their lean-to, and Bauman took a shot at it, and I guess he missed. And then, hey, Brian. And then they heard the thing all through the night making a harsh, sinister sound, was what, according to the description from Theodore Roosevelt. Then the final day they were there, they decided, well, maybe it's just a bear. Maybe we're just hearing things that we shouldn't be, that are not out of the ordinary. So they separate. They go and get the traps because and none of the traps had anything in them. So Bauman comes back to the camp, and he's calling for his friend. His friend isn't answering. So eventually he comes across his friend dead.
Oh,
Neck broken. Apparently the neck was also shredded a little bit.
ooh.
And well, that was enough for Bauman. He said, "No, heck with this. I'm out of here." So he gets on his horse, leaving everything but his rifle, and he takes off. Now, one thing that Roosevelt said was when Bauman was, he couldn't suppress a shudder. So that sounds pretty credible, and I think Theodore Roosevelt wouldn't have put a story like that in his book if he didn't think it was gospel truth.
Mm-hmm.
Roosevelt was a very wilderness president too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, his beginning career was very, out west, and
Right. There's one thing about Theodore Roosevelt that probably most of us don't take into consideration, but to this date, Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest president when elected as president of the United States. And that because, at that time with the facial hair, he looked older, but he's still to this date the youngest president ever elected to be president. So, and within his journals, I don't think there would have been a whole lot of embellishment. I think he was just actually recording the events in which happened at that time and really didn't speculate specifically on a Sasquatch creature, but left it up to the mystery for those to decide for themselves. And that's very credible within itself.
But that's our weird fact for President's Day.
There it is. That's President's Day, and that's your weird fact. So
thank you, Henry, for telling us that story.
Yeah.
No
How
problem.
about it, huh?
And Sean's back.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. Well, since we got the little President's Day ditty out of the way, and I always enjoy the story of the wilderness hunter, and you just wish there was a little bit more substance from it. Could it be attributed to folklore? Yeah, probably, but nonetheless, still an interesting story, and does give a little kind of Bigfoot history, as we kind of latched onto it and made it our own. Vance, why don't you kick off and get us right into tonight's topic?
Well, tonight's topic is, the Giants of Kandahar. And I kind of took interest in this subject when it was first presented probably 5 years ago. And I listened to some testimony. And of course, the testimony comes from several different enlisted military from the Marines, Army, and Air Force personnel that were serving this country in Afghanistan. And one story that really kind of captured my imagination was, we're all familiar, or maybe some of us are familiar with the Bagram Air Force, or the Bagram Air Base that the United States built in Afghanistan, which has been in the news as of, about 2 years ago, when the current president pulled everybody out of Bagram, and then Bagram fell to the Taliban. But it was just southwest of the Bagram Air Force Base. Now, this region, there's a lot of mountainous region in this area, and we're not talking Rocky Mountains, but we are talking a mountainous region. And it does experience, if that's the correct word, the same kind of weather events that we experience here within the Midwest and within the Central East Coast. It has winters and it has summers. And there's been a number, not a plethora, but there's been a number of reports of something seen bipedal that was extremely large in the mountains of Kandahar. And there's one story that I just leave to, it is what it is, because a soldier who was a Marine was killed. And that evidence is laid out in public evidence. And the way he was killed leaves it to speculation. Now, the witness testimonies were that they were asked to patrol a certain area by locals that lived in the area that were looking to remove and destroy the Taliban that were in the area at the time. So they were collaborating with U.S. forces while the U.S. forces were present in the area. And they had made mention to the fact that there is something that they have seen at nighttime that is bipedal, but extremely large. Now, we're talking larger than a typical Bigfoot sighting that we've had in this country and in other parts of the world. We're talking something about 15 feet tall. And the troops...
Perspective of 15 feet. What's the average height of a ceiling in a house?
Well, 8 foot.
So add another almost half a room in height.
Exactly. Right.
So you're like at
yeah, I mean, if a house that has a peak on it is at average of 20 feet. So this, whatever this is, could almost look over the top of the peak of a house. And, which is creepy within itself. I mean, you're talking something taller than what a giraffe is, which is one of the tallest living land mammals on the planet. But put that aside for a minute, they were actually given a call to duty. And this isn't a video game reference at all, but they were called to duty to do a patrol in the area of this mountain region, which did have specific cave recesses that were completely unexplored, but a lot of the military intelligence referred to the fact that these caves in these mountain regions probably were housing not only the Taliban, but at the time, Osama bin Laden, and may have sought shelter within these caves. There's one story that was very prolific to me that on the patrol at night, and we're talking after midnight, these patrols went out and they had an occurrence with something that came out of the cave system that was at least 15 feet tall and was defending itself with a very large spear. Now, the description of this creature was it had very long hair, but none of the description encapsulated the fact that the whole body was covered in hair. It just stated from the witness testimony it had long hair. And this thing was massive. And it came out of the cave system and was threatened by the troops, U.S. troops, outside of the cave. And it had taken a spear in defense of itself as the troops were going to fire upon this creature. And this creature took this spear that it had and it impaled one of the troops and killed him.
Yeah.
No.
Vance, just for the show tonight, I found an illustration online from a Nate Hillman, I believe, is the name of the artist.
Right.
So if you're finding the show and you found tonight's show, that art that we found was an artistic rendition of what happened on that day. And then I was watching a video earlier today from L.A. Marzulli, investigator into strange shit. And I interviewed him years ago, back when I was one of the hosts of Beyond the Edge Radio. And he had a replica of what it looked like the tip of the spear that was used to gore a Marine. And now a lot of this story came from a gentleman who went on to Coast with George Norrie in 2002. And I had heard this story before in the past, Vance, and to me, it was always one of those stories that had a lot of, fantastic elements to it. Now, I'm not saying it can't be real. I'm just saying that, from an element of fantastic events, this is definitely one of them.
Right.
And and I'll let you keep going, but just wanted to give a little bit more, context. And if folks want to go out and do a little bit more research, you're going to find a decent amount on this. But the video I found most helpful was from L.A. Marzulli earlier today.
Right.
Which is where I got the analogy for the room height, because it's not something you put it in perspective of something everybody can understand.
Right.
15 feet is freaking big.
I don't want to mess with it.
And how the hell something 15 feet tall escapes satellite photographs or isn't seen more in caves? Like these things are all in caves. I mean, we were all over those caves at one point, not us, but U.S. Armed Forces and, Joint Task Force over there trying to take care of the terrorists. And I'll let you continue on with the story. It's just, to me, it's always the elements of the fantastic.
I mean,
go ahead, James.
Well, you make a valid point about everybody being in those caves. It wasn't just us in those caves. It were the people that were hiding from us that were in those caves.
Right.
So it wasn't like it was an area where nobody was around. If we weren't looking for people in those caves, there were people that were hiding from us in those caves. So, we talk about how we flush out indigenous animals. The perfect example would be that is we encroach into an area that they are used to being in. Right. Somehow they eluded multiple groups trying to hide from other multiple groups.
Well, now put yourself in the perspective of the Taliban man there, okay? You're in this cave system hiding from American forces with guns who are going to turn you into Swiss cheese, or you stumble upon Mr. Kandahar Giant over here who's going to use your femur as a toothpick.
Maybe.
So
maybe.
Which way do you go?
Yeah, that was part of the conflict of the whole story is this Kandahar Giant actually picking sides, or is it just wanting to remain left alone and solo within its existence, no matter who comes into its territory?
Well, and there you think that if this shares any kind of characteristics or with his cousin there, Sasquatch, he's going to stay out of the situations.
Right.
Well,
very true.
A valid point about maybe not picking sides, but recognizing that the reason the one group's in the cave is because the other group is hunting it. So if you get rid of the other group, maybe the other one will go away too.
Yes, I'm not saying that Kandahar Giant's going to throw on the red, white, and blue and do a couple leg drops to the sound of "I'm a Real American." I'm just saying that, there's these. You've got two choices here. You're a Taliban man, and you're in the cave, and you've got one way where you've got the Allied forces or whatever we called ourselves at that time, getting ready to drop a smart bomb on you, or you've got the, again, the giant in there. Which way do you go?
I'm gonna take the bomb.
Yeah, me
too. Right.
You got a real life David and Goliath situation going on.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you bring up, because you go back to, the David and Goliath situation. Who's to say that that same entity wasn't part of that story? Even though it's a biblical story, who's to say that that wasn't part of the same genre of what we're talking about in Kandahar? Because it's taking place in the Middle East. And where were all these stories written from?
Well, now
the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, and for how long now have people that have been interested in Sasquatch research also been talking about the Nephilim or whatever we've
the Nephilim, right? Correct, right.
Again, those stories have been kind of intertwined now for some time. Kandahar Giant kind of segues itself into that.
It does, right?
Maybe geographical location, yeah.
Right.
King asks, are these UN troops? If so, that makes it interesting. It would be people from different countries.
The stories, Jamie, actually is from U.S. Marines that were on the ground doing patrol in Kandahar at the time when this one story that happened. Now there's a few other stories that happened from aerial surveillance that reported the same thing, but the story in which I'm speaking of was U.S. Marines, not UN.
This said branch unknown, possibly Rangers, but still, it's definitely United States troops
involvement, right? Correct. Now, the Marine that was impaled and killed with this spear type of weapon that was used by this alleged giant, that's a thing. Okay, when I say that's a thing, that is how the cause of death was recorded when this soldier was removed, because that was their priority, was to take this soldier back with them. And even though he was deceased, he was taken back. He was impaled. That was done through diagnosis of cause of death, that there was an impalement. I find that kind of fascinating too, because the weapons at the time would not have caused that type of injury without a very large tool to create that type of injury, unless the individual using a spear was incredibly big, because the spear was appropriate to the size of an individual from what was witnessed. Now, I'm not calling that a fact, but that was the injury that was sustained by the deceased Marine that was killed at the scene.
But now what we're also saying in this story is this giant was taken down.
Yes.
It was mowed down
Yes. Immediately once the impalement happened, there was a fire. I won't say a firefight. There was a lot of fire from the Marines to this, and it was taken down at the time. What became of that afterwards is kind of left as a mystery.
According to the witness, the giant wore canvas or animal hide covers to protect its feet like moccasins and smelt like dead bodies.
Right.
The creature's body was airlifted back to the squad's base by a helicopter and net, and from there it was loaded into an aircraft, taken away, never to be seen again.
Seen again, exactly.
The Department of Defense has no record of this.
Right.
Then again, a lot of people think that this was perpetrated and blown out of proportion by L.A. Marzulli. It's an interesting story, but as Jamie pointed out in the, his question that he not question, more of a comment that he made, Jamie King. It's also interesting claims like that came out of Vietnam during wartime, talking about the rock apes, which is something you were going to segue into here in just a little bit. Anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, again, and I'll go off of Jamie's thing because I had texted Sean when we were doing pre-show a couple days ago, along with the Kandahar Giants, were a number of witness accounts of those serving in Vietnam, U.S. troops serving in Vietnam, that were assaulted in the same way that we have Bigfoot accounts here, with rocks being thrown at them from these 8-foot tall hair-covered things in Vietnam to get them out of the area. Now, mind you, at that time, Vietnam was absolutely being assaulted in the jungles. Not so much in open lands, but you're talking the jungles, the home, the living room of what we would consider, a Bigfoot creature, and their homes are being blown up by these bipedal, hairless, covered, camouflaged people that show up. And they're getting a little irritated. And there was a lot of witness testimony to the fact that these things were up on the ridge throwing rocks, because at that time, what did they have? They didn't have weapons that we had. So and that's what actually coined the term rock apes, because they were throwing rocks at the troops that were being stationed in the jungles waiting for the Viet Cong to come into the area to wipe them out. It's very speculative, but it's very possible that happened.
Vance, we got to take our break here.
Wow, already. Holy cow.
Time to slip into the fiction news. Folks, we'll be right back right after this quick news break. Thanks for listening so far tonight. Great story on the Kandahar Giant. And remember, you guys can subscribe to become a Patreon for Sasquatch Experience 4. Gentlemen, put them up there as little as
$2
a month, ad-free, some more content coming through, just because we love
What
you.
is love? What is love?
We have a lot more of that down there. For as little as
you can't get away from that.
Bargain where we come from, but stay tuned. Come back all after this. A little stranger than fiction news.
News team, assemble!
Oh, wait, this is pretty good. Hang on. This made me laugh. Ah, yes. You see what they just did there? Threw in one last balloon joke. This is the Sasquatch Experience Stranger Than Fiction News. And let's get into it from KTLA, which is out of Los Angeles, with an article posted that data, according to a scientist, openly claims most Bigfoot sightings in the United States and Canada are probably, wait for it, black bear. A data scientist by the name of Flo Foxon, F-L-O-E, by the way, in case you're keeping score at home, has shown that most Bigfoot sightings in the United States and Canada are probably black bears, quote, walking on their hind legs. No, Flo, they walk on their front legs. Come on. According to the U.S. Forest Service, American black bears usually walk on all fours, but will stand on their hind legs if it means they get a clearer view or a stronger whiff of something interesting. And from this position, they can appear almost human-like. In parentheses, only much hairier. This isn't the first time scientists have suggested black bears as the explanation for the Bigfoot phenomenon. You get the feeling that Flo Foxon has probably never done any camping. Of course, this is coming out of Los Angeles. Probably the only place to go camping is underneath an overpass. And then, of course, maybe the strange creature that Flo would see is a bipedal creature wearing a trench coat. That'll be the next article that comes out once this one gets reputed. The Bigfoot is actually a homeless person in a trench coat, which explains the long hair and bad smell. When we come back, we'll continue on with this article and how it just goes and destroys itself. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Sasquatch Experience.
On top of spaghetti, all covered in cheese, I was so full and bloated, I felt the unease. I went to the bathroom to empty my bowels. I broke out in a sweat because I was out of paper towels. Never, never, ever, 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 never run out of toilet paper or paper towels again, because Cloud Paper delivers right to your front door. Made from sustainable 100% bamboo, and it's produced to be cloud soft and strong. Cloud Paper ships in non-plastic packaging and can be customized to your needs. Just visit cloudpaper.co, because this paper saves trees. Again, that's cloudpaper.co. Back in 2005, and we're going back to the article from KTLA, back in 2005, one scientist compared black bear populations with reported Sasquatch sightings in the northwest corner of the United States. Go sit in the corner. Us smart people refer to that as the Pacific Northwest, but, you know, the research that went into this is the northwest corner of the United States. However, that scientist concluded that a species of animal other than the American black bear is responsible for sightings of this alleged, quote, mythical creature. In 2009, another paper from the same region of the country showed a high degree of overlap between black bear populations and Sasquatch sightings. In areas with high numbers of black bears and humans, more people report seeing Bigfoot, and this is especially true in the northwest corner. Again with the corner. On the other hand, in Texas and Florida, black bears are not nearly as common, despite the fact that Sasquatch sightings in these two states are common. Notably, Sasquatch sightings have been reported in states with no known breeding black bear populations. Remember that part. Although this may be interpreted as evidence for the existence of an unknown hominid in North America, it is also explained by misidentification of other animals, including humans, among other possibilities. In conclusion, according to Foxon, if Bigfoot is there, it may be mini black bears, even though he just got done stating the states with no known black bear population, but it's still a bear. Thanks again for listening to this edition of the Sasquatch Experience Stranger Than Fiction News and Flo Foxon.
Well, thanks, Vance. Flo Foxon, as Brian Corbin says.
That whole argument about Bigfoot being black bears has been debunked so many times.
I know.
John Bindernagel put a field guide type drawing in both his books comparing a Sasquatch to a bear.
Right.
And the comparison is like night and day.
No, and that was really the only reason why I referred to that article, because there are those that say, oh, it must be a black bear, even though it was in regions of the country where there's no known black bear populations. But, oh, it's still a black bear. Okay, you're not making much of an argument, but that was my whole point. It kind of blew its whole self. So again, like I stated in the news segment, I think the next article will come out. It's just homeless people in a trench coat with long hair and they smell bad.
That's rude.
It is very rude.
Take a moment and acknowledge the commercial for cloud paper.
Yeah.
That, had your dulcet tones of, now I'm going to have a hard time eating spaghetti. And
I'm so sorry to everybody.
So grumpy since you wipe your ass with paper towels.
Well, yeah, I kind of did. Hey, it's a vintage commercial, and we're just gonna go back to that from time to time.
It was great. Well done.
I apologize.
People look forward to those commercials.
Yeah,
That was
I'm sure they do. Let's go back to Vietnam.
Let's go back. Well, ironically, here we go with some bamboo up your ass.
Shove some bamboo up your wazoo. Yeah, right.
There, Vinny Boo Boo.
As we all try to find our footing again to get back into the show again, but yeah, go ahead, Bake.
No, I mean it makes valid points that not every sighting as a Sasquatch, but to say that every sighting must be a bear is the same as saying, everything you see must be what it is. This is where I get mad about ghost hunting. Hey, I heard all these noises. It's got to be this, and they say it. They say it so many times that you hear it because you hear their voice in your head, not a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people need to recognize that not everything's explainable.
And that's a valid point. That's a very valid point. Let's not just
spaghetti killing your guts.
I kind of did.
Hello, Ohio.
I'm sorry we were still stuck on that whole segment, but
topical. The radio.
Going back to the whole Kandahar thing. There were also a couple of reports that were a little bit more obscure of patrols that were being done in Black Hawk helicopters over the mountainous regions out in and around the Kandahar area where some of these caves were. And this was more at twilight. And some of those that were on patrol, including the pilots of Black Hawk helicopters, stated seeing these creatures that they could not identify that were walking upright, that were coming out of the mountains. Again, I throw my arms up in the air going, why would a helicopter patrol unit come up with a story like this? They didn't evacuate the area. They continued to patrol the area, but this is just something that they saw as an anomaly of what was going on at the time when they were doing their patrols, and they reported it. That was it. There were no deaths involved. It's just there was something out there that we saw and we captured. Unfortunately, a lot of this being under military control, so to say, is not going to be made public as far as video coverage goes, even though some of these Black Hawk helicopters do have very sophisticated night vision and digital video recordings of the areas in which they were over. So maybe those do exist. We just have not been made privy to it yet. But these were the reports on the radio that were being transmitted back to their headquarters in the area at the time of this is what is being witnessed and what is being seen. So, again, what is the value of that? What is the tangible 100% proof that this actually happened? I cannot see, for what makes sense to me, that you're on patrol in a Black Hawk helicopter and you're going to report back something that is so felonious. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, let's talk about that. Oh, sorry, Forker. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, James. You were going to
So let's talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, to get in a Black Hawk helicopter and be the pilot, you have to go through years of training. You have to go through so many psychological exams. You have to go through so many things because they don't want to give you $1 million to $1 billion piece of equipment and have you run it into the ground. You don't make reports on things that'll get your pilot license pulled.
This is true.
You don't make reports. Now, you can say, hey, I saw something that's weird. We need to get a secondary scoop on this. Can we get one of those little drone suckers? Or do you have satellite footage of this area? Hey, check my dash cam. I got all this stuff here. I don't know what it is, but I know it's not our enemy. I know it's not a friendly. I know it's not a deer.
Right.
Whatever the Afghan version of a deer is.
Right.
Or do Afghans have bears? I don't know. But you're not going to report over the radio, hey, I just saw blah, 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 blah. Because when you hit the ground, there'll be a guy asking for your keys and telling you got a couple of days off.
Yeah, this is true. Okay. But let's keep in mind, too, what the crew is of a Black Hawk patrol helicopter. It's not just the pilots that are on board. You have gunners on board. You have navigators on board.
Co-pilot. You have people that are
exactly. And it was the correspondence of communication between everybody that was on board that was making this identification of scene. So there's this collaboration of information from the pilot, co-pilot, gunner, and navigator on board. Plus you have ground units that are on board in case they have to speed rope out of the helicopter to take ground cover. So you have a number of people on board, that are, they're very highly, look, I am a member of the United States Air Force, retired clearly, but I know the excruciating diligence that were put before anybody is on board any type of flying aircraft, whether it's helicopter, jet, or prop propelled aircraft. When the communication happens in a military zone, it is very particular and it's very specific, and there's no BS, or as I like to say, Bravo Sierra, that is transmitted back to any kind of ground headquarters at all, unless you are very specific that this is exactly what you are seeing. That's when that transmission happens. Yep. And that's what I found most fascinating, because these transmissions actually happened, that there was these entities that were seen on a twilight patrol just before sunset. And to see this, again, I'm just kind of left with my arms up in the air going, wow, there seems to be a lot of tenacity, if I should say that there's probably something here.
Right.
and I left everybody in dead airspace.
No, Forker's talking. We just can't hear him.
Can't hear me because I hit the mute button. That's why.
I can hear you now.
Yeah, there you go.
No, it's fascinating. I think you make some really good points there, Vance. But, at the end of the day, us, the public, would never be privy to any of this.
No.
There'd be no way in hell we'd get any of this, particularly one, because it probably still would be classified as anything happened during a wartime communications. It was during a time of war. I don't remember what we called that particular operation at that point in time. I know they flew mission accomplished. That wasn't true.
Afghani Freedom.
No, I think it was maybe Operation Afghani Freedom. I don't remember what it was called, to be honest with you. And I had a couple of friends serving it, so shame on me for not knowing. But all that would probably still be classified. We probably wouldn't even hear any about that until we were dead.
Right.
I don't know how long the classification works on that, but hell, we're just starting to get stuff from Kennedy again.
I'm amazed we found out how Lincoln was killed.
So how would you even go about even requesting information on that? It'd be very difficult for sure. Any kind of corroborating evidence for any of the things we're talking about here tonight. Now, Jamie King had posted, and I didn't want to lose sight of that because I think it was a very important question, which was, do local Afghans have stories of these types of things? But you and I determined they did.
Yep.
But also, the Pakistani people have stories of creatures in the mountains as well.
Well, that's actually what initiated some of the patrols, and thank you for Jamie for bringing that up. That's what actually started these patrols, is because the local Afghans that were pushing back against the Taliban at the time stated that they had seen and dealt with these, and I'm going to use the word anomalous beings that were bipedal giants in the area. And so the curiosity was raised. Well, let's go take a look and see what this is. And this is when the Marine was killed by a spear. That whole thing, that's what propagated the whole thing, is because those stories still continue to the day, to this very moment when we're doing this show, that these people have seen this time and time again, and we're asking U.S. military to do something about it, because clearly it was threatening to them. Whether it had invoked any kind of danger to their personal space or village, that I don't know, but that's what they asked of the U.S. military to investigate.
And then again, as we talked about, the Barmanau is a bipedal primate cryptid that inhabits the mountainous region of northern Pakistan. The shepherds have reported this thing living in the mountains. So there are stories that are just not, indicative of Afghanistan, but also that kind of mountainous range. It's fascinating stuff. And, of course, we go and, take for granted that, the United States is the only country in the world that has cryptid researchers, and that's just not the case.
No.
If you go and just look at some of the articles, you'll see them from the French cryptozoologists and some Spanish zoologist, I think, who actually looked into the stories of these creatures. So KCJB asks, I wonder how many soldiers saw something but chalked it up to sleep deprivation or exhaustion. And, this is interesting, Vance, because when you and I talked to the author of the book Cameleo back on the existence of strange things, another show you and I hosted once upon a time, we were talking about desert apes. And that was one of the worries that, they had. How did we know this wasn't a mirage or something that was just kind of being, made up by our mind? Was it something that was, caused by sleep deprivation, exhaustion, or even some sort of hallucinogenic gun or drug or gas or weapon? So we really don't know, but those are great questions. And I guess the only way we'd get an answer to that is if more soldiers spoke up and came forward as to what they've seen.
Right.
And
but it also ties back to, again, Sean, going back to the whole Vietnam rock ape scenario. What are the odds that the sleep deprivation and the drug induced state, whatever it is, kind of comes up with the same stories in all these world conflicts?
Well, now here's one thing I could say. And if you wanted to be a real scumbag, you could completely just deject every soldier that came from that era as a witness by saying it's PTSD. It's definitely a mental health issue. I mean, you could really, what better witness to discredit? No, it's not too easy, because we've all learned for so long the best way to hide the truth is to keep it in plain sight. By calling people crazy because they've had these traumatic experiences, you could completely discredit every one of these witnesses of something they've seen. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm saying it's something that they could do and could easily explain all of these
that would be true.
Anomalous events, right? Right.
But people would dismiss it, and they would go, "Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. I could see that. I could see that being a." But
how crazy is it that they're all within the same genre and the same thread of the same type of creature that's being seen?
Well, I mean, again, you're in a jungle area, you're in a wilderness area, and
Right.
what are
I understand what your point is, and I totally agree with it because I don't know the answer. But this all kind of ties back into the whole Montauk argument of, well, yeah, this creature was being developed within, a laboratory underground in Montauk, New York, and it escaped. And but what is the reality and what is not the reality? Why do you keep coming up with the same 8-foot tall, hair covered creature in all these stories from all over the world? This is what I find completely fascinating.
But it's not original. The story's already out there. I mean, all these places have legends of, I think with the exception of Hawaii, all these places have stories of these giant upright primates and that go back in time, not just in the 20th century, that go way back even further than that. So, I mean, if you're going to make something up, why not go with something that's already kind of fitting into the world of, what some people commonly accept. You can build a base of credibility off this as well as you can just discredit it all. Jamie King
that's true.
And Hughes go in such a strange direction, yet not, because stories of true giants, and if you read Lauren Coleman's books, The Field Guide to Primates, and so on and so forth, stories of the true giant creatures, Henry, you know what I'm talking about, are often reported wearing some sort of clothing or body covering.
Right.
So, I mean, there is precedent there as well. So it is weird. I mean, because I think in my respect, it doesn't fit the common theme of Bigfoot, right? We completely hair covered. And when you start hearing these stories of them wearing loincloths or some sort of protective covering, you go, well, that's got to be a little bit more human.
Yeah.
But in the art fiction of the Kandahar Giant, Vance, it looks very human.
Right.
Just very big human.
It's very big, and therefore it wouldn't be able to adapt to any kind of human clothing to begin with at that size. Now, what Jamie brings up, it kind of makes sense to me. And yeah, it's creepy as all hell when there's been testimony of a Bigfoot wearing a ripped up flannel shirt. Yeah. Well, if it's observing us in our daily life from a distance and it sees that we wear clothes and there's clothes hanging on a clothesline to dry, because not everybody has a clothes dryer in their home, especially in more remote areas. You're hanging them up on a clothesline and it's going to try to mimic the same thing. How many times have we heard stories of Bigfoot, and I'm throwing the air quotes up if you can't see it, mimicking a baby crying or a human speaking, trying to replicate the human behavior. And maybe it tries on a flannel shirt, maybe it doesn't fit, but it's caught in a roadside crossing by another witness wearing a red flannel shirt. Yeah, that kind of creepy out, but maybe it's learning. Maybe it's picking up habits of what humans do and is trying to fit in a little bit. Who's to say?
You never know.
No, we don't know yet anyway.
We suspect for a long time that this thing is the master mimicker. Right? The sounds this thing can make and replicate are incredible. We've heard it with, Julie Wrench on here. We go back to the Uwari project, the Uwari stories of, it calling her name, which, it still to this day gives me goosebumps when I think about it.
Yeah, it's creepy.
None of the behavior in that is undaunting to me or out of the realm of ordinary. But as you start hearing it from other parts of around the world, you start to wonder, God, how could this not be legitimate? But, whenever you throw something like the military in on top of the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, strange creatures, you throw it into some sort of war zone. Now, all of a sudden, you have every element of fantasy you could think of.
Right.
And now the story just cannot be real just because of that. But the onus, folks, is not the onus, but the bitch of it is we're never going to know, because we're never going to be privy to the information in any such way. We're never going to get it. So it still resides in the realm of kind of that space between fantasy and
right,
reality.
And it kind of falls back into the whole lap of the story in which we interviewed Todd Neese. They're doing a maneuver. Yeah. They're doing practice maneuvers, and it didn't seem in all of his interviews that he has done, nobody was looking to see creatures standing out in an area where they were detonating anything. None of them were looking, but they see these 3 creatures standing out there, and it caught his attention, and it caught the attention of others going, what was that?
If we
and again, it's a military activity that was happening, and it seems though when there would be military activity happening, which is very aggressive, your curiosity, whether you're a wild animal or not, you're going to want to know what's happening in your house. And, when I say house, I'm talking thousands of acres. That's your house. That's where you live. And there's this aggressive activity. You're going to have a bit of concern. What's going on here?
If we brought Todd on here and asked him, did you ever expect to see a Sasquatch that day?
Yeah, he would say no.
Hell no. I didn't expect to see it. And especially more than one.
Caused him more trouble than anything else.
Right.
And that's the bitch of it, really. I haven't met one witness or anybody that's gotten anything out of this besides ridicule.
I'm so happy.
That's interesting.
Right.
Seriously, I've not seen anybody. Nobody's gotten rich off this. Henry, have you gotten rich off this topic?
Nope.
No,
he's
you
wealthy.
spent yourself in the Bigfoot poverty there. You Mr. U-Haul when he comes back from every conference. But I'm just saying, like, nobody has made a tremendous amount of wealth.
No, and exactly. And I don't think that anybody, and going back to the whole military issue, look, when you're enlisted in the military, you're a very young adult. I don't see anybody writing a mental script in their head to say, ooh, this would be pretty cool to send back home of this mythical thing or this bipedal creature. Because I was enlisted at the time, and just to give you my personal experience, I'm not going to speak for all those that are enlisted. I can't. But when I was enlisted, my sphincter was so tight to make sure that everything I did was absolutely to the protocol which was asked of me. And then to ask me to step outside of that, to come up with this mental script of a fantasy, it just I wouldn't have had the time to do it. Nor would anybody else that I was enlisted with would have had time to do it unless something actually happened.
Well, today it's a different story, though, because today you don't have to be so creative. Because as I just said moments ago, you can have AI write the story for you, but you're talking about
that's true.
You're still talking about the early 2000s. And honestly, right now, I think if anybody in the military is going to come up with some story, it's going to be a UFO story. I don't think it's going to be a Bigfoot story. I mean,
it's a balloon. Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah. When the good year blimp is
anyhow, we just got to, put it in check. 9:58, guys. We've really blown through this hour. I think, and Jamie's
already,
got a point. They'd love to hear us interview one of those witnesses. And Jamie, if we could get them, we would. I haven't brought witnesses on the show for the most part, like just true, genuine witnesses who haven't become investigators, because I haven't wanted to put them through the public, mill of us
scrutiny. Yeah,
and you don't know where my mind's going to go in the middle of a conversation. You don't. Mm-hmm. We could hit some raw nerves. We could talk about some really delicate things, and we could really piss off some people. And I don't want to do that. But I think we do need to get some witnesses on here. I think maybe after we've vetted them first a little bit to just to get them comfortable with the idea.
Right. And first and foremost, to say for those that, did serve in any
outside of the U.S. that have served in any kind of military conflict, you give them the thanks first. Thank you for serving.
Sure.
And now, do you want to just jump into the pit of let's scrutinize you and your story? No, my priority is thank you for serving the country first, and kind of leave it at that. And then if they want to share the story, that's a different thing.
But you come out, you got to expect it. You have to expect the scrutiny, though. The story's got to stand on its own, and it's got to be, or you're just wasting time.
Right.
And that ain't good either. Go ahead, JB. I'm sorry.
I mean, and that's a valid point, because the fact is like I said, if any person from a helicopter crew would come down and say, I saw a Sasquatch, he'd be in a little room with a little table.
Yeah.
He'd be there for multiple hours with some guy just staring at him like, is this what we're doing?
Yeah. James, look at the guy that came up to us after our presentation at Hocking Hills. Like, he was just one, he was, after all those years later, 20 plus years, he came forward and talked to us about it. Of all things.
And the thing is that because he felt comfortable with the conversation, but he wouldn't have felt comfortable telling his CO 20 minutes later. Oh no.
And how, and like he told us, his ass would have been bounced right out of there if he had come forward with that. Sensitive areas, you're in a very sensitive area with communications, and you have to be trustworthy,
for lives, equipment,
and that's where it goes. But guys, we got to pick up on another show with this. This is a great topic tonight, Vance. Good job. Henry, James, thanks for so much for being a part of this. Guys, we'll start with Vance. Where can folks find you? We'll work our way around the
where they can find me. They can find me sitting right here in front of the camera, because that's where I spend all my time. But you can find me over on Instagram, Vance Nesbitt. I give you an extra T on Nesbitt. That's a free bonus T on Nesbitt. STF News, and of course Vance Nesbitt with, again, the free extra T on Facebook.
JB, where can folks find you?
Right now you can check out Lot 56, the land. That's what my project's been going. Henry, do you have a woman at present?
My niece. It's my niece.
Oh, okay.
Hi, niece.
Hi. Sorry, we're shocked. I'm sorry. All right, moving on. Henry, please talk.
Henry,
well, folks can. I'm on Facebook at Henry B. May the 4th. That's where folks.
Yes. Where else? You're not on Instagram yet, are you?
No.
Well, we'll have to get you on there, folks. I'm Sean the Fork Chop Fork. You can find me everywhere on Facebook at Sean Forker. I don't hide behind a pseudonym. You need to find me. I'm socially active, as are the rest of us. Henry, give us those closing words, my friend.
Y'all be good or be good at it.
That's the Sasquatch Experience, folks. Good night.
You've been listening to Sasquatch Experience. Please rate and review wherever this podcast is consumed. To share your experience, visit us on Facebook or email us, squatchexperience@gmail.com. Keep on squatching.